Hello and welcome to the Shoreline of Infinity Supplemental. This is where we're putting our event horizon online, and under the circumstances of COVID-19, where we cannot do our events in front of a live audience for the time being. One day soon we will be able to do that. One thing we like to do is we do readings, we do dramas, and we also do interviews. And we've got a great interview today, hopefully, I'm sure it will be, with a writer based in Scotland here called Ru Pringle. Ru came to my attention a few weeks ago when Ken MacLeod sent me a video of him reading one of his new story, and I said, have you got anybody else you want to recommend to actually do one of these readings? And he said, Ru Pringle. I must confess, Ru, I'm sorry, I hadn't heard of your name until Ken MacLeod told me about it, but there's a pedigree for you. So I said, okay, if Ken likes Ru Pringle, I will find Ru Pringle. And I found his book, October Song, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I thought, yes, this is the man. So I contacted Ru, and very obligingly, Ru sent us a reading of October Song, which has been on the website for a few weeks now. So please go along and find that. And I thought, I'm going to find out more about this chap. And to give you a bit more background as well, in Shoreline and 30 we run a magazine, and in that magazine we run a section called SF Caledonia, where we highlight a particular science fiction writer in every issue. And the first issue had John Buchan, who, amazingly enough, wrote a science fiction story, believe it or not, called Space. It's in issue 1 if you want to find it. And we run through most of the dead science fiction writers of Scotland that we can find. And we decided to move on to live ones, and we've done a few recently. Chris Cowstow springs to mind from memory. So Ru, this is where you join a long line of Scottish writers who we've featured in SF Caledonia. Unfortunately for you, you're one of the live ones. So, so welcome to Shoreline Infinity Online.
Very much for having me.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to have you. October Song, I loved it. I love the fact you've got a character, a middle-aged character called Coire Keir, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who's a police officer who decides that she wants to be part of a plot to kill the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at Holyrood in a future not too distant, of a Scotland, if I get this right, that became independent, then had its independence snatched away from it. Is that about right?
That's about right. I hope that's not too spoilery, but yes, that's pretty
That's pretty much how it
much it.
starts, if I remember rightly. But the
Uh,
great thing about the story is then Coire goes off up the west coast of Scotland on a sort of a journey, really, which takes us through a lovely dystopian future of Scotland, which is disturbing and fascinating in turns. At fairly breakneck speed as well. So it's a thriller set in the near future, which is a dangerous area of science fiction to write in.
yes.
Um, so, so Ru, can you tell me how you came up with such a character as Coire Keir? Because I loved her.
Um, it's there's um, uh, physically anyway. She is pretty much the embodiment of my girlfriend, but there's a reason for that because it started life as what was going to be a screenplay for a short film, which could be shot on a low budget, um, which I wrote for my girlfriend, who's an actor. But as I was writing it, I just thought, hold on, this is a book. It might be a screenplay, but this is coming out like a book. So I wrote the book instead, much to her disgust, as I still haven't finished the screenplay. And that was also about 5 years ago, I think. So yes, I am hoping that the screenplay will be used eventually in some form, but the book came out first. It was published in 2018. There's a couple of other people who also have bits of their characters in Coire Keir, but he's not particularly based on any one person I know. I just had a very vivid idea of her as a character, and the sort of making of her. So she was quite a nice character to write. I enjoyed my time with her. Um, so yeah, hopefully she's engaging and sympathetic, although she's a little bit of an anti-hero in some ways.
Yeah, well, if that's what your girlfriend's like, I'll have to be careful if I ever come and visit you, because she's obviously a very strong character and got. There's this idea of a police officer deciding that enough's enough. I'm going to do something about it and take the law into her own hands in some ways. I hope it isn't as too much of a spoil. I don't think it is, because she's being chased. So I think that's a fairly logical conclusion to draw from that. But it's the fact that she's then travelling all the way up the West Coast, which is an area of Scotland I love. I love to bits that coast of Scotland. So it's great to see those names coming up, and then you sort of destroying them as you're passing through them with various adventures that she has in her travels.
I have to say, one of the bits of destruction that happened was a very sort of cathartic thing. You might know the one I mean, involving a fighter plane.
All right, okay. I'll have to
Okay.
go back and dig that. Yeah. All right, okay. I just try and be careful as well, not to spoil it, but and also the fact that what I love in the book as well is how much detail you go into. I read the Kindle version. How long is the printed version? I should have checked. How many pages is it?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's about 500 pages.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I loved is that how much detail you go into, and so you really can get a good, clear picture of the scene that you're writing. I can see why you start as a screenplay, because you're sort of detailing pretty much everything as all the characters are travelling through the landscape and what they're doing. But what you're doing as well, the story's not stopping, which I love about it. A lot of people will do an info dump, and you sort of have to sort of wait, read it through. Okay, come with the story, please. You've got the knack, I think, of actually putting the detail in, but the story still keeps travelling through. How do you get that sense of travel at the same time as detail? That's impressive.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you found that. I don't really know. I'm glad I seem to have pulled it off. I mean, I'm certainly conscious when I read it of an infant, so I try and avoid them. I try and weave them somehow into the narrative of the story which is going on. To be honest, it's something I haven't really taken apart and analysed in detail in that way. But yeah, I just try and keep the story moving forwards. If information is imparted, I just take the view that it has to be disguised as something else, because after all, it's the characters and the story that is the important thing. It's easier, I think, in a world which is in many ways familiar, like the one that October Song is set in. I find it a lot harder when you have to world build at the same time, as you do in a lot of fantasy and science fiction, especially at the start of a book, because you have a massive amount of contextual information to impart at the same time as getting people involved in the characters and also laying the foundations of the plot in an extremely short space of time. So yeah, I find that pretty challenging. For some reason, I found it less so in October Song. Then again, I suppose in a way I was world building in that as well, because I didn't expect most readers to know anything necessarily about the west coast of Scotland or Edinburgh or, the Scottish political situation. So I suppose there was a fair amount of information to get over in that as well. But yeah, I'm just glad I seem to have done it successfully.
Yeah, I think you have, and even so, the way the story unfolds, you do actually pick up what the background of where it's all been set, and I like the sort of the slow reveals as the story unfolds. That always brings you along. But the very fact she has little adventures on the way around the different islands, use each island as a sort of different little Gulliver's travel idea, really, just popping onto an island and having a little. I don't want to go into detail again to prevent spoilers, but I love the idea of having to pause at an island in a journey up the coast in a kayak. Another adventure happens, which is completely unexpected, but in the context of the world you've built, it really helps brings that context very clear. So how much fun did you have writing those pieces of having to pick an island and then decide how to populate that particular island?
Yeah, it was good fun. I mean, I have spent a lot of time around various parts of the West Coast, and although it wasn't, I had to research a lot of it to get the detail right. It was, yeah, in some ways just a kind of writing about a thing that I love, or a place that I really enjoy. And I'm glad that's the way it came over, because I always thought about it as a sort of not post-apocalyptic but pre-apocalyptic road trip kind of
Yes.
idea. Um, and yes, it was lots of fun. I enjoyed writing it. It wrote itself in to some extent more than most books I've written. It sort of just took off right from the word go. The actual writing of it was really quick for me. I think it took me about three months working in the evenings, as I was working during the day at the time. But as always, the part I find really hard is the editing and chipping away until it's all right. I always find that borderline traumatic, really.
I'm impressed. 500 pages in 3 months. That's some going. I can almost hear some writers now tearing their hair out and banging their heads on the desk in envy.
That's not that's not normal for me. That's a lot faster than I usually write.
So how did you get into writing then? And when did you start writing fiction? And
Fiction. I wrote my first fiction book when I was 23. It's only just getting published. I'll leave it there. But in terms of getting fiction published, I had some short stories published around the millennium, just a few. But like everyone, I suppose, it's trying to juggle other things in your life. And I very much like writing, but the times when fiction writing coincided with not having to earn a crust another way is, that hasn't been that much of an overlap.
yeah,
But yes, I mean, I used to write in newspapers and magazines. I started out writing for outdoor magazines when I was at university, and much to my surprise, people kept asking for more, so I used that to help put myself through university,
all
and
right.
it just went from there, really.
So you've been a writer pretty much all your life then, is it? Even though you've been
Um,
earning the crust as
yes,
well, the writing's always been going.
on and off. There have been periods where I haven't written anything. I mean, I've spent most of the last 10 years as a touring musician. I wasn't writing anything then, um, except for tunes.
All right.
But for me, there's an overlap between writing tunes. I think written stories have a rhythm in the same way that tunes do. Writing music, and for me, tunes are a kind of story, and I have a very visual idea of what I want to get across when I'm writing a tune. So
Uh-huh.
there's a big overlap for me between music and writing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I see where you're coming from. So I don't know how you. I sometimes do some writing. I sometimes do some songwriting. Sometimes some music writing. So I was going to ask you then. I suppose on that basis, when did you decide to write your idea, your feelings, or your concepts as a tune or a story or a song? Is it which becomes more comfortable with a particular idea? I mean, I don't know how you. I'm not really expressing myself very well, but from inside you, there's this creative energy comes up, and it bursts out, And you've got three choices: a song, a tune, or a story.
I think I understand what you mean. Well, I mean, for me, for me, tunes are a very immediate thing. I mean, some of my favorite tunes that I've written have been written in uh, literally a minute, probably. Um, you know, I'll just have a mandolin or a guitar or whatever in my hand, and it'll
Yeah.
just pop out, and then I'll think, oh, that felt nice, and then just write it down, and I can't really improve it. Have sat around for years before they've felt right. But compared to, I mean, songwriting is a whole different kettle of fish to me. Because you have to come up with a tune or a riff, and then you've got to find something to say. So in some ways, it combines um, the disadvantages of writing a tune with the disadvantages of writing a story, and then you have to sort of meld the two together in this sort of great big Frankenstein kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, it's so the sort of degrees of freedom, if you like, in which there are to go wrong are almost exponentially increased compared to a story or a tune. At least that's my experience. So although I can and do write songs, the percentage of ones that I actually want anyone to listen to is probably a lot smaller than the percentage of my writing that I would like anyone to read, or the percentage of my tunes which I'd like anyone to listen to. And writing stories is, yeah, I don't know how anyone else feels about it, but it's hard. Not so much the writing of the story, but the polishing it. The bits that you know aren't right, and you just want to forget about them and just say, "Oh, it'll do," but of course it won't do, and you just have to keep honing and honing. And sometimes you have to be really brave and just say, "This bit just doesn't work. I need to change it completely." Ah, but it took me a month to write. No, ditch it, and that's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, time. I find that time is giving up on stuff can be a really good idea sometimes. Then you come back to it and you can see clearly. Yep, that's mince. Get rid of that bit.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Get rid of that. Having an extremely blunt girlfriend also helps in this respect.
That would be useful. Well, actually, what I was going to move on to now then is this idea of bringing the music into the words, because you've got your next book, Surfers, coming out. Is it coming out soon? Surfers?
Yes, it is. The official publication date at the moment is the 20th of June. It's
Excellent.
possible that might change, but I'm going to try and stick with that. Um,
So, can you tell us a little bit about Surfers and to set the scene? Because I'd like you to actually tell us, read a little extract from it as well. If you can set the scene for Surfers. And
okay, well, it's basically set in I suppose you could look on it as a alternative um, or alternate reality. It's set slightly in the past, and the reason to do that was that, to be honest, the developments in world politics, their events over the last 2 or 3 years, is something that I just feel if somebody had written it down as fiction, nobody would read it. It would be completely unbelievable. So I wanted just to take a little step back before everything just got completely weird and present a different and hopefully more entertaining kind of weirdness. And basically, the setup is that a a strange event has happened in some part of the universe, and this has resulted in an expanding bubble of space-time in which the physical laws as we understand them do not apply. And this bubble's expanding at very close to the speed of light and consuming the universe. And there is a society is built up, basically surfing the wavefront of this expanding bubble of space-time. And they sort of take in waifs and strays, and they have a government department whose aim is basically to select societies that are about to be destroyed this on terms of cultural merit. and send out a sort of rescue party, usually at a very low budget, and rescue societies and get them all to sort of surf the wavefront. So it's there's a little bit of eugenics going on here. It's all a little bit dark in some ways, but basically an alien who's an adrenaline junkie has been researching this particular society, which happens to be Earth, and decides for various unlikely reasons that this is the society that he wants to be involved in rescuing. So he's packed off by his superiors to try and launch a rescue mission, and his superiors do not like the way he is because he's uncouth and an adrenaline junkie. So they decide that they're going to do their best to sabotage him. And one of the unlikely things that he develops a bit of a penchant for is Scottish folk music. So that's a large part of my background. It's a chance for a sort of a humorous, hopefully, dig at the whole folk music scene.
Yes, I must admit, when you told me, they gave me a description in the email about this idea. I've spent about 20 years in Edinburgh folk scene as well, in the Cadia scene. So yes, I recognise it very well indeed. So I'm looking forward to finishing the rest of the book as soon as I can. So do you want to read us an extract then to give us a flavour for it? That would be great.
Yeah, well. So our alien friend has not long arrived in Edinburgh, or at least he crash landed fairly close to Edinburgh. And he knows a little bit about the society that he's inveigling himself into, but he's still fairly green in some circumstances. Studying the Google map it had memorized, the creature trotted west along a broad lane called Prince's Street. Obsessively trimmed gardens sloped down towards the railway, above which blackened volcanic cliffs supported a forbidding and ancient-looking fortification of cemented stones. Every dozen steps revealed some new surprise or weirdness. Brightly clad humans capered about, distributing leaflets or performing aerial tricks involving coloured balls or flaming sticks, or yes, its eyes were functioning correctly. Internal combustion-powered cutting devices. "Way to go, bro," it bleated aloud. And here, central to a crowd of onlookers, near the juggler of the lethal machines, the alien couldn't believe it. A heavily tattooed human male was swinging a weight between its legs, attached somewhere beneath the check-patterned skirt it was wearing. The alien approached cautiously and peered under the skirt. The weight was impressively heavy, judging by the stretching of the organs it was tied to. Still not quite able to believe that this wasn't some illusion, the creature waited for an opportune moment and gave the cord a firm tug. This caused the human to utter a very clear, high-pitched sound and collapse into a curled-up position on the ground, something the audience appreciated more than all the swinging and juggling, if their reaction was any indication. The valley between the street and the imposing old fortification, amongst manicured beds of multicoloured plants, was a fountain. It was composed, gruesomely the creature thought, of the golden likenesses of several humans compressed together into a column. In the shallow pool beneath, the creature removed what it could of the grime from the station. Refreshed, it continued sunwards through a leafy area where humans hid their dead. Stomach rumbling once more, it took an experimental nibble of the lush-looking alien grass. The omnipresent grime left a metallic aftertaste. Dispirited now, the unlikely tourist pushed on, following a gloomy and almost deserted street curving below the dark cliffs. Graffiti-daubed walls echoed to hooves on tarmac. Street entered a dank tunnel. The creature picked up its pace. Soon it found itself in a cobbled square hemmed by jostling, tall front buildings which looked older than most it had seen so far. The square, it had read, had been used for the, fortunately out of fashion, ritual of publicly strangling and breaking the necks of individuals who were unpopular. From the memorised photograph, it could even recognise the pub which had been named after the practice, the Last Drop. Other pubs were here too. Issuing from the open window of one of the nearer establishments was a familiar sound. As if by an invisible halter, the creature found itself drawn helplessly towards it. There was a perilous moment when it became stuck in the doorway between competing parties of humans, one attempting to leave and the other trying to enter, and neither, for no reason they could fathom, able to do either. But then, everything came home to the alien in a single big rush. There could have been few beings, it supposed, privileged to listen to the development of a musical form in compressed time since the earliest days of its broadcasting. And now, having done just that, here it was, in person. Its hearts were pounding. Here, large as life in the room before it, was the low D whistle of which it had heard so much, and the fiddle, 2 of them. Here too was the famous boron, although there was something about the scent of the drum's skin that it found quite off-putting. Here also were the cold blaw small pipes with their cluster of wooden drones and their arm-operated bellows, the omnipresent guitar, one of the famous Loudons no less, the button accordion with its pearlescent plastic keys, and the tuba? Okay, that was unexpected. Everywhere, humans were either chatting or listening intently as the tunes, some of which the creature was shocked to find that it knew, bobbed and dived, weaving their spell. For the first time, the alien could not just hear, but see how each sequence of tunes, known as a set, was strung together on a whim. The whole fantastic, teetering, improvised creation evolving as a unique confluence of instruments and instrumentalists whose minds were shaped by their collective environment in that singular snapshot of space-time. In this way, a set was like a breaking wave, a wave ridden by the musicians and their spellbound audience. When it eventually stopped and the players turned to their intoxicant-filled glasses, the set seemed far too short. As the applause came, mainly from what were clearly tourists who had come for the festival, the creature found itself joining in, choked and close to tears. Sudden silence. "Did ony of yous hear a weird frantic clacking noise in here just now?" asked the button accordionist with the very big udders. Her expression registered what, in human terms, was suspicion. Everyone else was looking around in apparent alarm. There was a flurry of nods. "Could have sworn I heard bleating as well. And it's funny, through that whole of that last set, I was getting this guy-strang smell, like goat. Alejandro, has that Spanish boron of yours gone clarty, or has some boheed brought a bloody animal in here?" Its elation tinged with foreboding, the alien fled from the square along a street called Westport. It found itself in an area where human males could pay to enter dark rooms and see female udders, as well as their enormous round bottoms. Like many things about humans, this seemed most odd. If seeing udders was desirable enough to pay for it, why did they cover them with clothes? Was it all part of some state-controlled rationing system? An udder tax? Curious, it slipped into one such establishment, causing the doorman, a human almost as wide as he was tall, to look confused when the door opened itself behind him. Once inside, however, it found the relative dearth of nipples and body hair disturbing, and nobody had udders as impressive as the button accordionists, so it quickly left. There seemed to be fewer people in this part of town, and the buildings had an increasingly unwelcome aspect. Hurrying onwards, it passed a cinema. Films on show were all about humans killing each other, pressing feeding orifices together, or copulating, often all three and occasionally at the same time. None of this was appealing to a vegetarian with only a passing interest in animal documentaries, so it trotted on southwards up a road called Home Street, and found itself outside the shop it had marked on its memorised map with a little red cross. The shop was smaller and shabbier than anticipated. It didn't matter. Light-headed once more, it gazed longingly through the window at a small array of immaculately polished surfboards.
Hey, that's excellent. Yeah, that reminds me of a few sessions I've played in too, yes.
Oh, yeah, that was meant to be set in the White Hart.
I was going to, the White Hart, that's one of the first pubs I went to when I came to Edinburgh back in 1981. And there was a
Okay.
singer-songwriter playing at lunchtime. Dennis Swanson, his name was. Dennis Swanson. It's a
Don't
long
know.
time ago. I've no idea where he is now. If he's still alive, I don't know. But that was my introduction to Edinburgh. So, oh, there's a bloke singing and playing Scottish songs, which I come from England. It meant little at the time, and now mean a lot. So that was my introduction to it all. So yeah, the White Hart. Wow.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I should probably have mentioned before reading that was that at that point the alien is invisible. He's wearing an invisibility cloak, so he can see everyone, but they can't see him.
That's fine. No, I've got a Baran. It doesn't smell as bad as that, but it does sometimes have its moments.
I had a friend who had a Boran, which he bought off the internet, and he left it in a cupboard for a wee while. And when he opened the cupboard, it was literally crawling with maggots.
Did it improve the sound?
No,
Okay, so when did the idea for this book come from? Getting back to the book in question.
the honest truth, I have no idea.
Excellent.
I it just I don't know. I really don't know. It's not a very interesting answer, but it's the honest one. It just sort of built up, really. I just liked that the concept was the first thing that I got. I just thought, well, what would it be like if this bubble of space-time in which all physical laws are different and just random things start happening was approaching, and it just went from there, really. And then I just started thinking, well, this is all a little bit hallucinatory. So hence the connection to a folkie who, let's say, had quite a colourful time in the 1970s, who was picked because this is the person most likely to be able to cope with the oncoming weirdness.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Maybe ask you another time who is your inspiration for that character. I presume there is someone who inspires you.
Actually, the scary thing about this book is that everybody in the book is based on a real person, and there's no way I'm going to say who they are.
Well, I hope our paths
But
didn't cross sometime in that lot. Then, in that case. So, what period of time are you talking about that you're writing about in this book?
well, it's I mean, some of the backstory for one of the characters goes back as far as, well, actually, some of the backstories of, I think, about three of the main characters go back to about 1970 or the early 70s. And this section of it set in the 1990s, around the time of the Iraq War. And most of it is set in 2012,
Right, that's
which I
fine.
saw as the
Okay, I'm safe because I was
basically.
mostly active in the folk scene in the 80s, was my time. But, yeah, so this kind of mix of big science fiction ideas and the Scottish folk scene just appeals to me. So I hope the audience is bigger than me, 'cause I think it will be. Reading the other stuff, it's a delight to read. The characters come leaping off the page, and you
Oh,
want to be there
fantastic!
with them. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that. Almost as soon as we've stopped the interview, actually, I'm looking forward to getting back to it.
Thank you
So,
very much. Actually, I should just say it's I thought it was a bit of an odd juxtaposition, but then my agent introduced me at I think it was EasterCon in Glasgow, one of the years it was in Glasgow, to the concept of filking, which I had never even considered that such a thing could exist. Singing about science, singing folk songs about science fiction. Um, so
yeah.
yes, there you go.
Yeah, well, I have filked in my past. I have filked a couple of times, and yeah, my songs I written, I performed at Event Horizon. So the poor souls there have suffered. Songs based on Arthur Clarke's Sunjammer. What else have we done? Fahrenheit 451, and a few other songs. So yes, I have gone down that road of mixing folk music and science fiction, and it's a lovely thing to see in book form now. Um,
Great, thank you.
so there you go. Um, yeah, so that's great. So look out for that June the 20th, you say. Who's publishing that? Who's the publisher?
Self-publishing. I tend to do this cross-genre things, which publishers don't like very much. So
Didn't wonder.
yes, this was looking like one that was not probably never going to be published by mainstream press. In fact, I was surprised. The response I got was, well, nobody really wants humorous science fiction, and there were two writers were named who were doing it, and I was told that was enough, which I found a bit sad, to be honest.
Oh, goodness me. There's not enough of that. That's interesting because I just put out a call on Twitter for people to come forward with ideas of good examples of humorous science fiction. Because once you've gone beyond Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams, there's still plenty of writers out there, but there are very few Twitter messages are coming through with good examples. I'm kind of stretching myself. I mean, the modern ones, back in the 60s and 50s, Harry Harrison, Isaac Asimov wrote a good few jokes. So they got the sort of classic writers then produced some good stuff, but there's very little being written now. So I'm really pleased that your book's come out, or is coming out soon, where you're allowed to laugh at a science fiction concept again, which is it's just.
I know it does seem a little bizarre. I mean, I can't be that unusual. I love reading humorous science fiction, but like you say, I'm struggling to hear. I mean, there are a few people I can think of, but again, they're all self-published. I'm assuming because they had the same reception I did from publishers, and two of them I know of are selling very well as self-published books on Amazon. Sorry, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but yeah, they're doing really well. There is a market there. It just seems to be something that mainstream publishers, for some reason, are ignoring at the moment, and I don't really know why.
Well, the problem, I suppose, with humour is it's hit and miss. You can't. It's very hard sometimes to gauge how it's going to go down until people actually get to read it. I mean, Douglas
Yes.
Adams in the early days must have been struggling to get his stuff out, but it just touches a nerve, and it's just so just essentially funny. I mean, that's basically all it boils down to, really. So
I,
yeah,
I, I still I preferred the radio series
mm,
to the books, but it's
yeah,
still one of my favorite things of
yeah.
all time. Uh,
Oh gosh, yeah. Now I listened to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when it was first broadcast in 1978, and it was 10 o'clock at night, same time as the news. Had to listen to it to my mum and dad's stereogram with headphones on. So while they were watching the news about doom and gloom, I was with the headphones on, just in tears, laughing my head off for half an hour of the news.
just
Yeah,
delightful, and I grew up with it. I mean, the first time I heard it, I was 8. I was
yeah,
wetting myself then, and it's just so multi-layered that I got all this stuff that
yeah.
I hadn't noticed the first time round. So I, grew into it almost. It's such a shame he died so young. I'd have
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
loved to have seen what he'd be
But
producing
what a
now.
legacy to leave behind, though. I, mean, I can quote Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy far more easily than I can Shakespeare. I think it's got it's a profound effect on life as well. So, yeah, so there's not enough humour in science fiction, so I agree with that entirely. So, Ru, thanks for adding to that. So, look forward to that.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So, but I also see you've got two books coming out as well soon: City of Dreams and Dust and A Haven in the Stars. Can you just tell us briefly about these? These are different again by the looks of it.
Yes, I mean, it's some sort of serious, fairly hard science fiction um, with some very contemporary sort of subjects that are involved. Spans about 500 years and covers a lot of physical area in terms of space. Trying to think what else I can say without spoilers. So yes, some fairly sort of big concepts involved, and quite a different kettle of fish to surfers, which is another of my problems, because I like writing all kinds of different style and things, which probably doesn't do me any good in terms of writing career. But I tend to write what interests me. So yes, they're both fairly hefty books. They're longer than October Song, each of them, and it's a two-part series.
Excellent. And when do they come out?
The official release date is the 9th of July.
Oh, right, okay. You're having a busy time the next month or so then.
Yes. Yeah, doing the publicity for all of this is, I'm not, I'd find any of it natural or easy.
Yeah.
So I definitely prefer the writing side to all the publicity that you do now.
Yeah. Most writers are the same, and understandably, it is a different world to work in. Yeah. Okay. Well, Ru, I'm going to say I've just call a halt to this, I'm afraid. I've really enjoyed listening and talking to you. That's been great. And
Thank you for having me.
it's been a pleasure. And good luck with the writing. And stick to what you want to write. That's what's best. That's what's when the best writing comes out, I think.
I
Okay.
think so. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ru.